Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Center for Technical Development webinar today. Just so I can make sure that we've got audio, visual, etc. working. If folks can type something into that questions box, find that on your panel. If you can type in, good morning, hello, yes, I can hear you. Anything into that questions box so I know things are happening. Great, okay, I'm seeing some responses come in. Thank you all so much. Great. So just one note as we move through our presentation today, if you have a question that you would like to ask, you can type it here into the questions box. You can also raise your hand. Some of you might have found that little hand icon. When you click that, it will allow me to unmute you and you can ask a question directly. There will be a segment during today's webinar where we will actually take the mute, auto mute function off as well as camera, and you can share both those things for a discussion with the panelists and presenters today. So just be aware of that coming up later in the webinar. But in the interim, if you've got a question as we move along, the questions box is the best way, and or raise your hand if you just want to make it a little easier, have a conversation with the presenter. Just a couple other things as we move along today. If you also, when we get to that point of being able to ask questions, make sure that you have the audio pin put in so that it does recognize you if you want to verbally ask a question. Just a couple little reminders on stuff for folks. The CTD webpage is a great place to find information about this webinar and follow up from it, as well as any of our future and upcoming webinars. If you go to our website under training and training events, we've tried to make it pretty easy to navigate this. The first tab on there is CTD webinars and web training. In particular, for today's webinar, you'll find a series of links that was posted today that our presenter will be referencing today in relation to cover crops. So those have also been dropped in the chat box, but it might be easier to go to the web page, be able to access them there. If for some reason you have to log out early or you've missed this or any other webinar, you can always find links to those afterwards in the tab below under archived and recording. So you can find recordings, all the titles are hyperlinked to all of our previous webinars and links, etc. So a lot of great information on there for you. So with that, without further ado, we will get started on today's webinar. I'm excited to have Allison Nichols with us, who is going to talk to us about cover crops. We've got a few other folks as well who are panelists on here who will also share what's going on in their districts. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Allison, to introduce yourself and get us started today.
Nice. Good. Can everyone hear me? Am I good to go?
You sound great. Yep, I can see you as well.
Okay. Good. Well, yeah, so I'm super excited that we get a chance to get together and talk about cover crops. Just a quick introduction to myself and why I'm focusing a lot on cover crops in my position here at PCD. I started here at the Pierce Conservation District about 3 years ago, and our farm program had just acquired a new no-till seed drill, and so that was one of the areas that I was supposed to cover in my new position is, you know, start getting this drill out, start doing more with cover crops, and that was supposed to be a big focus of my work from the beginning. We're fortunate to be located right next to WSU Puyallup Research and Extension Center. So there's several researchers there, as you probably know, that are doing really great cover crop work. And we wanted to continue that collaboration and build it. So today I just kind of wanted to share a little bit about what we've been doing the last 3 years, and then also have a chance to hear from a few other folks what they're doing with cover crops. And I just, you know, in the work that I've been doing here, realizing more and more that I really need to be networked with what other people are doing. There's a lot of great cover crop work being done and resources, but you know, trying to adapt all the great information to our regional situations. I'm really eager to be talking more with other researchers, other folks at CDs, and what are people doing? What are they trying? What are our farmers trying, and what's working? And just be better networked. So that's sort of, you know, when I was talking to Nicole about this a few months ago, you know, what would it look like to get a cover crop group going where we can meet regularly and discuss things and share and just be better networked. And she had suggested starting out with a webinar like this just to get the ball rolling. So so I thought I would just spend, you know, 20 minutes, half an hour talking about, you know, reasons why I'm excited to get better networked around cover crops, and why right now would be a really great time for CDs to be talking more. And then we're going to hear from Eric Hsu at Snohomish, and Nicole Warren, who was just at Thurston Conservation District, but she just joined our team in the last couple weeks, and also Megan Weldon at King CD, just to get some other ideas of what other people are doing with cover crops. And then I'd just like to open it up and talk about what would people like to get out of a cover crop networking group, and just open the floor for that discussion. So so now let me just bring up my PowerPoint here. Is that working?
Looks great. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Oh, and I also wanted to say that I just have kind of 3 main points that I wanted to make about our cover crop work, and that at the end of each section, I'll just stop and see if there's any questions that Nicole will help me field. So, I think right now is a really great time to be really well networked around cover crops for a few reasons. And the first one is that I know a lot of you may have already heard about this new Western States Cover Crop Council that is just coming online in the last couple years. It kind of, the start of the initiative happened about 3 years ago. There's a Grassland, Oregon is a seed company near Corvallis, and they convened a really awesome 2-day cover crop forum about 3 years ago, where they just brought researchers and farmers, seed companies, a lot of NRCS and USDA folks, all in one place for 2 days of seminars, and then a lot of field tours, including the Plant Material Center in Corvallis. And one of the goals of that forum was to discuss, hey, should we start a Western cover crop council, because we're the only region that doesn't have one. There are 3 others. You can see here in my presentation here, this is the homepage for the Midwest Cover Crop Council. And you can see here they have a select cover crop selection tool. They have a lot of regional specific information, and it's just sort of a cover crop forum, online forum for people to focus on what's working in their region. So this is hopefully the direction that we're going to be heading in the Western states as well. And so at that forum that Grassland, Oregon put on, they put together an initial group to spearhead that movement, and then they applied for a SARE grant to continue to develop the group. And in the links, you'll see or in the chat, you'll see a link to that SARE project grant, and you can kind of read through that and get a feel for what the vision is for the Western States Cover Crop Council. And then if any of you went to the Pacific Mountain West Nutrient Cycling Conference that happened, I guess it was a couple weeks ago, you may have heard Nick Andrews from OSU talk about some updates for the Western Cover Crop Council. And he said they're hoping to have a website up by December. So it's just around the corner from us having our own website. And they also have divided the region into smaller subregions, which is great because it's a huge region, including Hawaii and, Nevada, Montana. So they've divided it into subregions, and the Pacific Northwest region is going to be headed up by Doug Collins here at WSU Puyallup. So he's going to be heading up that our region. It's also, I don't know if how many folks are here from the east side today, but there's also an Intermountain region, subregion, and they're kind of splitting off too, and that might be a more appropriate subregion to get linked up with too. And if you go to the Western Cover Crop Council Facebook page, they have a link to a series of webinars that are going to be happening starting in December. So so a lot of fun things happening with this new Western States Cover Crop Council. And if anyone would like to get involved with the Pacific Northwest subregion, I'd encourage you to reach out to Doug. His email's there, and get linked into the listserv that's starting from that subgroup. Nick Andrews also said that that the Pacific Northwest subregion is going to be developing a set of webinars as well, starting this winter. So so that's the first reason that now is a really great time to get networked around cover crops, just because we have this new Western States Cover Crop Council coming online, and there's a lot of good momentum around that, and it would be great for CDs to really be plugged in and be part of developing that group. So I'll pause here. Does anyone have any questions about the Western States Cover Crop Council, or comments, things that someone knows that I might not know about them yet?
Yeah, so just a reminder for folks, if you want to put anything, just type something in the questions box. We'll relay that, or just raise your hand. Please contribute to the conversation directly that way. I can unmute you if you just click on that hand button, put anything into the questions box. Okay. Not seeing anything at this time. You can go ahead, Allison, but just in case something pops up, I'll be sure to let you know.
Sounds good. Okay. So the second reason that now is a great time to be networked around cover crops is that there's the new Sustainable Farms and Field Bill grant program that was passed. My understanding, it was passed this spring, but it didn't actually get funded this year, but the hope is that it will in the future. And this is a grant program that's intended to help agriculture reduce its carbon footprint and fund farmers to be able to do things that will help them achieve those carbon reduction goals. And of course, cover crops is a really exciting piece of that whole effort. And so the Conservation Commission is charged with putting this program together. And so this is something that's really exciting that's coming down the line. And it's complicated, working cover crops into this effort will be complicated, and there's a lot of things to iron out. So it would be great if we could all be really well networked around cover crops to be able to really provide input into this effort. So there's a link, you can go and read more about the bill at the state legislature site. Does anyone have any more information on this bill, or anything interesting to say about it? Let's move on.
Yeah, not seeing anything pop up at this moment.
Great. Nice. So and then the third reason that I see that's really important for us as CDs to be better networked around cover crops is just that WSU and NRCS, their field staff have just really been reduced in the last 15, 20 years. We don't have an extension agent here in Pierce, and I think King is still without an extension agent. I know many counties do have them, but overall, the extension outreach capacity for WSU and NRCS is somewhat reduced. So, but it's CDs who still have these really active connections with farmers. And so I just feel like we're in a really great position to facilitate information sharing between researchers and farmers, and then to connect farmers with each other and share, be part of that sharing network. So, and here at Pierce, we've had the opportunity to, the last 3 years, to do a lot of on-farm trials with WSU Puyallup, and mainly Doug Collins. And it's been super fun and really easy. It just has been a really natural fit for our farm program. And I know that there are other CDs doing similar work like this, and it would be great to share more about what all of us are doing. We have a ecology grant that funded our no-till drill, and then there's a component of that grant that allowed us to bring WSU in and lay out a series of on-farm trials, and then after then have workshops with farmers to evaluate the trials together. So that's it's worked really well, and it's been really well received. My role at PCD with that work has really just been to connect WSU with farmers and trial sites for the trials, and contribute some to the planning process of what are we going to try, and be part of that discussion with the farmer and WSU, and then doing some help with the field work, which is really fun. Get to help Doug, load up the drill and make sure everything's working, and just do the legwork of getting those trials established, and then facilitating the workshops at the end. So, in Doug's case, he's doing a lot of great work, and a lot of information to get out, but he doesn't have the capacity to plan workshops or to do all the facilitating that requires. And so it's been a really nice partnership for us to be able to fulfill that role for him. So does anyone have any questions about that what that's been like and how that's worked?
Yeah, just folks, feel free to put any questions in or raise your hand. We can unmute you if you want to talk about your experience. Okay, seeing nothing at this moment, Allison.
So I just thought I would run through a couple of the areas that WSU has been really interested in looking at with cover crops, and share a little bit about the specific demonstrations and trials that we've been doing over the last 3 years. So one thing that Doug is really interested in is looking at cover crop varieties. We're all sort of used to the idea of, well, you take a tomato from Florida and try to grow it up here. It's probably not, it may not do very well at all. But I think, more and more folks at universities are sort of seeing variety selection as really the low-hanging fruit for cover crop innovation, and just really narrowing in on what varieties work in different regions. And Doug likes to talk about the example of, if you take a hairy vetch that is a variety non-stated, and you grow it for 3 years, and you get it from different seed companies each year, you may not really have a good sense of how it's performing, or you may discard it as a variety that doesn't work just because you happen to have a variety that's not really well matched for your environment. So he's really excited about just trialing more things and really providing information for people on what varieties, how varieties differ, and so people can take advantage of life cycle differences and different adaptations that are variety specific. So that's something that more and more folks are doing. And just one fairly recent source on cover crop varieties is out of the Corvallis PMC. You can access this really great report where they evaluated about 60 different cultivars. It was a study that happened across the nation at a lot of different PMCs, and you can read about some of the successes or failures of different cultivars for our region. It's a great resource to peruse when you get a chance. And so the work with WSU that we've done the last few years, we've done 2 years of fall cover crop trials at 4 Elements Farm, just looking at about 8 different varieties. And as an example, we tried three named varieties of vetches, and it was really exciting to see how those different varieties performed. And there was one that was just a clear standout, and it sort of confirmed, the idea that it's really important to do these variety trials because there's clear winners amongst cover crop varieties. So, and then this fall, Doug is comparing a variety non-stated rye vetch mix with a named variety mix, just to kind of compare how a named, a variety of rye and a variety of vetch that have been really strong in our trials, how those compare with the variety non-stated rye vetch mix that a lot of farmers in our area plant. So varieties, that's one area he's really excited to do more in. And then another area he'd like to do more work in is seeding rates and planting dates. I don't know if you've, when I look at different rates that are out there for different cover crops, it can really vary. And so Doug's interested in sort of doing more work in that area to develop more precise recommendations for farmers. And also he's interested in kind of fine tuning some of the planting dates, especially so that we can give farmers more precise information and options for those late fall planting dates. So that's another area that we've been working with Doug. And this fall, he is looking at different ratios of rye vetch to kind of determine, just to kind of tease out some of the dynamics there of adjusting that ratio and finding the right rates, especially with how the cover crop breaks down in the fall with the C to N ratio. So, and then another area that we've been working on is summer cover crops and year-long fallows. So we this year we replicated some work that WSU Vancouver has been doing with either mixing buckwheat or Sudan grass with red or crimson clover. We learned a lot. There's just a lot of really interesting things about that trial this year, just really proving the benefit of a mix when one aspect of the mix does well or doesn't do well, and how the other components of the mix fill in as needed. Just a lot of really interesting dynamics that we were able to observe. And then we finished those after we did the buckwheat and the Sudan grass mixed with those clovers. Those were mowed several times over the summer, and then we drilled some fava bean into that. So that's kind of, taking that year-long fallow all the way into the fall winter. So that's one that we were working with this year. And then one of our farmers also has poultry as part of his operation. So that's something that will be really interesting to see as part of that system as well. And as you probably know, that more and more people are really looking at, well, how can we get livestock back into our systems, and how can we do that with cover crops? So that's an area that it would be great to network around as well. And Doug is very interested in no-till, low-till, and strip-till. He's done a lot of work with that at the Puyallup station. And so he did a few other trials with drilling faba bean into Sudan grass, or just disked vegetable debris. That's one area he's looking at more. And then he also did a trial this fall with kale transplanted into Sudan grass, and mixing some clovers in there too, so the Sudan grass will winter kill, and then the kale will keep going and be supplemented with that clover as well. So, and then another area that I hear a lot from farmers wanting more information on water tolerant cover crops, especially here on the west side, and then winter kill cover crops, because a lot of the winter kill cover crops that work in colder regions may have some nuances on the west side, at least, that are a little different, and so they're interested in kind of adapting that technology to our region. So that kind of is a quick summary of the work that we've been doing at with WSU. Like I said, we've had these workshops at the end of, to help or to invite people onto these farms where we have these trials, and see what they think and get their input, and make that information sharing happen. And we've also done a annual cover crop roundtable. We've done 2, and those have been really fun. You can go see the recordings of those at our PCE website. And the hope there was to, have an annual event where researchers and farmers could come and have information sharing and networking. And we may, that effort may shift to the cover crop, the Western Cover Crop Council at this point. We'll see, because I know that they're planning to do some webinars in December and early spring. So it may be that to have a roundtable would just be more of the same thing. So we'll see how that develops, but that's been something that it's been really fun to do as well. And then we at PCD, we've also initiated a cover crop cost share program. We modeled ours on King's model, where we will cost share up to $150 per acre, and for folks to do cover crops. So that's what we've been trying to do, just find a really easy way to support farmers doing cover crops. So that wraps up what I had to share. We were going to hear from Eric and Nicole and Megan as well.
Allison, we had a few questions actually come in that maybe you can address. If we go back, a lot of these relate back to the farm trials you were talking about with Doug and WSU. The first one is, did you incentivize the farm trials for farmers, and if so, how?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. We did, in that with our grant, the farmers received about $500 stipend to have the workshop, to host it. And we also, through that grant, were able to reimburse them for any tractor work they did for us. Not a lot of the work was done by WSU, but here and there we had to have some support from the farmers, and we were able to reimburse them.
Okay, second one, you had mentioned there was a standout variety of cover crop that Doug found. What was that variety?
Oh yeah, the Lana vetch did really well. We looked at it's a hairy vetch, but also woolly pod is another name that it's often classified under. But we did a Languedoc, which is a common vetch, and Purple Bounty, which is another hairy vetch. And the Lana really stood out.
And for those, you showed a paper from OSU, but from these trials specifically, someone asked, is there information from those that folks can see or that's shareable or out at this time?
Right. Doug is working on getting that into a form that's shareable. He did do a presentation at the soil health workshop that happened a couple weeks ago that I mentioned, where he talked about the trials of 4 elements, the variety trials there. And I hope that we will get more information that we can share out for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And there was a comment, it would be really good to see that. Someone asked, are there potential plans for a virtual workshop to learn more about Doug's research in the future? Sounds like there was one. Do you know of anything that will be coming up as he wraps that up and gets more info?
Yeah, right. So he talks a little bit about the work in the cover crop roundtable recordings, and then he also will be, I believe we'll have it ready in December. He's taken a lot of footage from this spring and over the summer, anticipating that we wouldn't be able to have the in-person workshops. So his vision is to put together a virtual workshop, hopefully sometime in December. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, when that comes up, if you let the CTE know, we will definitely post that info up on our website under partner engagement and get a message out to folks as well.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple other questions still rolling in here. And there was kind of a comment here, it'd be really great to have data on cover crops and no-till operations for districts to be able to utilize that and share out. And then with that in mind, another question here, you can kind of maybe put them together, is when you're working with farmers on using the no-till drill, did any common issues arise, or, did you see any issues at all with poor germination rates?
For the trials, we had a hard time getting clovers to establish. And first year we thought we buried them too deep, and then we tried just doing more of a surface application that worked a little better. But other than that, I think things have we've had good performance on all of that. Doug has a very similar drill to ours. Sometimes we use his, which is it's not a no-till, it's just a seed drill, and then ours is a no-till.
Okay.
But one thing that we are finding is that our drill is a little too big for a lot of our smaller diversified farmers. So we're looking at trying to get a drill that can be run with a tractor with lower horsepower. So I'd be interested to talk to other folks who may have information on good smaller size seed drills.
Okay, and then a question specifically to cost share is there a cap on the cover crop cost share acreage, and how are you funding the cost share?
Oh, right, yeah. We've been funding ours through our PCD cost share, and we had a pilot program for it this year, so we were just sort of limited on once we had enough farmers with enough acreage, we were through our money and that was it. So, but I think if we move forward with it, we will have to come up with some caps like some of the other CDs have done.
Awesome. Yeah, Jay, you're welcome if you want to chat about your program too. But Jay Mira from King Conservation noted that the KCD's no-till drill is sometimes too big as well. Sometimes it's too small, and sometimes it's just right. So I guess you have Goldilocks complex KCD when you're working with producers, which is pretty common with any piece of equipment, I would assume. But I don't know if you want to talk about that, your success rate for matching it up with landowners and users.
Yeah, most of the folks who end up using it are doing pasture renovations. It's been great for that. We only have 2 or 3 cover crop, folks that are doing vegetables use it every year. So just mainly because of that issue with their tractors are just a little smaller than what the drill requires. So.
Okay, so those look like the questions that have come in so far. And at this point, Allison, if you want to engage your other presenters to talk about their program, please feel free. And for folks, please, again, you can raise your hand and put anything in the questions box about your experience or questions you've got as we move along, and we'll make sure to engage our presenters on that.
Yeah, Eric, do you want to start?
Sure. Thank you, Allison. My name is Eric Hsu. I'm a Natural Resources Planner here at WSU. That's Snohomish Conservation District. And Allison invited me to talk a little bit about what we're doing here at Snohomish in terms of cover crops and engaging our landowners into this program. It really dates back to about 2017 when we had very little to offer our crop producers in terms of, cost share dollars or technical assistance, so to speak, what we could do for them. So we actually put together an application for an RCPP grant and got funding through NRCS to develop a soil health program. And we got a substantial chunk of money to do this, and so it was great. So we were excited to work with our crop producers and offer them, cover cropping for one, and other soil health type practices that we could implement on their land. Chiseling and subsoiling for drainage enhancement and so forth. That program, it's ending here this spring in May. And unfortunately, we've had pretty limited success with it. I'd say we've got about 380 acres that we've been able to contract and get planted and enrolled in the program. Unfortunately, and really surprising to me was the main factor for this lack of participation is really boiled down to the cultural resources and producers not wanting to be involved with cultural resources review on their properties. And some of it goes back and it involves some of the relationships with the local tribes, etc. But, it was really unfortunate to see that. On the flip side, our successes that we've had out there, we've got our like I said, about 400 acres that got put under contract, and producers, planting, several different crop species, whether it be just field run winter wheat and vetch, or sometimes they've thrown fava beans into that mix as well. Another issue with that maybe I'll go into the challenges with cover cropping in our area that we experienced towards the end here. What we did in the meantime, while trying to implement this RCPP program, is we utilized some of our own internal rates, cost share dollars that we have here at Snohomish. And what we did is we basically offer people to sign up for, cover cropping and so forth, for reimbursement of the seed costs of planting a fall cover. So what we did is we had about $20,000 that we were able to put towards this program, and I based it on the average cost of seed that I found at our local co-op, which at their prescribed seeding rates, etc., came to about $50 an acre. And so that's what we offered. We offered $50 an acre, and I capped it at 100 acres per producer, just to try to spread that money around as far as we could. And we've had some success with that as well. We've in the last 2 years that we've run this program, we've had about 340 acres that have been planted. And granted, participation was a little bit less this year, but overall it's been fairly well received. I feel that the overall dollar amount that we're offering just isn't quite enough to get people excited about it. And hearing like with King CD and then what they have to offer with their program with $150 an acre might be a good way to go if I could just secure a bigger funding pot. So yeah. So any questions so far before I go into some of the challenges that we've faced?
There was one question that came in, question about does an RCPP cover crop planting need cultural resources review?
Yeah, actually, with any contract that NRCS puts together, there is a cultural resource review that's required. Interestingly enough, with cover crop, just by itself, the review, from what I was told, stays internal to NRCS. It doesn't go out to the local tribes or anywhere else for review or consideration. And even though I relayed that to my producers and time again, they still were hesitant and did not want to move forward with the program. So, but yeah, good question. Anything else? Any other questions?
That's the only one I see currently in the chat box. If anyone else has others, that'd be great, but I'll let you know if anything else comes in.
Great, thanks, Nicole. So I think, one of the main challenges that I'm seeing in Snohomish right now is just the timing of our fall planting cover crops. And it would be interesting to see with Doug Collins' work in terms of variety selection and choices that we could use that would germinate and grow better in a later planting type situation. With our crops that we're following here, we're typically following corn silage, sometimes potatoes, etc. And those crops can come off later like they did this year, and they're obviously dancing around the weather. And we got into a situation where by the time the corn was harvested, it was getting wet, and my last planting that I had done this year really went in on October 30th, and it's growing, but it's not anywhere that I'd like to see it. I'd rather see my ryegrass and fava beans that were planted 6 inches tall and doing a great job of covering our soil and avoiding nutrient loss and runoff issues. But instead I have little tiny plants out there at the moment. I think they'll come eventually, but that's just that timing portion and trying to get the crops in a timely manner has just been really difficult. Our producers, like everywhere else, they're just really busy, and trying to get this to the forefront of their daily work plan has been pretty challenging. Another kind of hurdle that I face is with producers who it's hard to get them to understand the value of it. I think they do see it, they know it's important, but with their cropping schematic and what they're doing year to year, some of the producers that I talk to are really like, I don't want to have to deal with turning over or turning in a cover crop in the spring. And some of them are also like, that extra plant and vegetative material is just going to really delay my ability to dry my soil out enough to get it ready for spring planting. So that's it's hard for me to come up with an answer to that. I mean, I guess I can kind of see it, and I wonder if in some of WSU's trial work, if there's some consideration to that aspect of how are these cover crops affecting soil structure and the soil moisture level in the spring, and is it delaying anything, which completely goes against kind of our no-till look at trying to get no-till adapted in our area as well. But so yeah, I mean that's kind of what we got going on here in Snohomish, and between our CPP and our rates money, cost share that we have available. And I guess just one more thing is, the participation level. We've had some small producers interested, but they kind of tend to not take that last step to sign up compared to our commercial farmers. All of our participation that we've had so far have been from our larger scale commercial farmers. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that have come up and so forth. So.
Yeah, we do have a question here. Someone talks about in Lewis County, lots of farmers use triticale for fall cover and chop it for haylage in spring prior to planting. Is anyone in Snohomish County using that? And before you answer, I will say in Whatcom County, which is just a couple counties north, yes, we do a lot of triticale on larger farms and harvest for either green chop or haylage in the spring for certain. So Eric, I don't know what your experience is in Snohomish County.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure on the level of triticale being planted in our area. I know there's a lot of dairy producers who will relay crop or interseed with their corn, and so they'll get a nice cover going into the fall with ryegrass or so forth, and then they'll take a first cutting off of it in the spring before they go back into a corn rotation. With our program, honestly, I kind of modeled it after NRCS a little bit, and I felt like, there's a lot of producers out there, or some of my producers who planted like wheat for a fall cover, like a field run wheat. Well, some of them were like, well, can I harvest that for grain in the fall? I'm like, well, no, we can't use our taxpayer dollars to subsidize your grain crop. And really, I feel we're trying to get as much of that organic matter back into the soil to build up that soil quality and soil health as much as possible. So I think that's an area that I've have yet to maybe do some further work in to see where it could be possible to allow some harvest of the cover crop in the spring.
Great, we've got another one here. Does anyone have information on cover crops in Christmas trees between rows? In Lewis County, we have Christmas trees on steep slopes, and I'm thinking this could be a VSP recommended practice.
Boy, I don't. I know in my own personal experience, when I go get a tree, it's usually grassed anyway in between the rows, but yeah, I don't have experience in that.
I will say if anyone out in the audience does, please feel free to type that in the questions box as a response. I would assume any type of a row-based crop without cover in between rows would be a great, either conservation cover or cover crop would be a really good response to that. And so another one in the comment, I think follow up to that was a lot of farms are just dirt. And I think that's pretty common in places, but that's a problem. And just another follow up. So Allison did mention that she has a nice cover crops in Christmas tree publication from Oregon that she'll send along. So I'll connect Allison to Kelly, and hopefully you can get that and utilize that, Kelly. There was also another comment here in the Midwest. There's lots of data on cover cropping paying for itself. Has anyone adapted those models for the Pacific Northwest? That might be a question to all of our panelists at this point.
I have not yet. I haven't had, I feel like, a long enough stretch of enrollment to really kind of quantify that at this point.
And maybe back to Allison, do you have any comment on that with your experience with cover crops?
Yeah, Nick Andrews has a nice publication sort of looking at C to N ratios and what the fertilizer value of a cover crop is. I believe that's on our resource page on our PCD web cover crop page. We've got a resource list, and I think that his publication is linked there. I can check on that.
Okay. And it looks like Nicole had quite a few comments in regards to this. And Nicole, maybe you can unmute yourself and talk a little bit about the tree nursery in Thurston in regards to that in-row cover. Okay, I'll work on, okay, Nicole, you should be able to unmute yourself. If you want to talk a little bit about that, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just commented, I had been working with a producer who has a large tree nursery in Thurston, and they were dealing with some particularly wind erosion issues on their farm. And so they were trying to figure out, you know, some different cover crops to try and incorporate, especially in the spring, in between when they're in with their bare root and taking things out and putting new things in. And so I don't have much to share on the results of them, but if someone was interested, I could connect them directly to the folks running the nursery there to see what's been working well for them. We kind of looked at like soil types and time of year to see what would be the best options to try on their farm, and they were going to kind of go forth and experiment in the past year with starting to use some different things.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, back to you, Eric. Anything else you wanted to wrap up on your kind of description of your program there at Snohomish CD?
You know, that pretty much sums it up. And I guess if anybody is interested and want to talk to me one-on-one, feel free to give me a call or send me an email, and we can figure out how to connect and just go over anything, you know, more specific if you like. But no, other than that, that's about all I have.
Okay, back to you, Allison, for working on moderating your panel here for your next presenter.
I see Nicole, so Nicole, do you want to share next?
Am I able to share my screen?
Yeah, I'll turn that over to you, Nicole, so you can do so. All right, should be to you now.
Awesome. I was just gonna put this up. So I actually just recently started working at Pierce Conservation District, but I had been working for Thurston for the last 4 years, and Marguerite's also on this call. So if there are more questions about future stuff at TCD, she'd be the best person to talk to. But I just wanted to share, for the past 3 years, we had a soil health grant through the Washington Soil Health Committee, and we did some really cool stuff with providing technical assistance and primarily funding a lot of soil health testing to kind of quantify some of that biological activity. So we didn't have funding to provide money to do cost share, but what we did was provide a lot of support to, we worked with about 16 different farms in Thurston County who were interested in a variety of different techniques, but cover cropping was definitely one of them, and so was conservation cover. One of the farmers that we worked with that I thought was doing just a really great thing was actually keeping a permanent cover of just like perennial Dutch white clover on all of their pathways. So they had these sort of strips in between, and they were about, I think they were about like 30 or 40 feet wide for all of their like through traffic, and they're in the floodplain. So it had like a multi-benefit for them, and definitely keeping soil in place and also acting as a pollinator crop was two of like the biggest benefits. And Allie just kind of asked me to share, you know, what's on my screen is just, we made this highlights for that grant in particular and some of the results that came out of it. But back in August, we did a really cool webinar that showcased 5 of the farmers that participated in this grant. And that was recorded, so that actually is available on the Thurston Conservation District website and also in the resources that Allie's sharing. And it was also just neat to figure out how to do that in a virtual format. So we actually went out to the 5 farms ahead of time and recorded some video with them. And talked about some of their practices and, you know, what their main concerns were with soil health. And except, you know, a few of those were crop producers who incorporated cover cropping and several other soil health techniques into their operation. Yeah, so that's available to check out, and kind of a great, I think, way to share with that community, especially folks who are interested in different techniques who had never used them before. So I think what is unique about Thurston is it hits both commercial producers in that county and then a lot of folks that are gardeners and smaller scale, or maybe they're only growing on a couple of acres. There's a lot of small like CSA operations as well. So yeah, those are just a few things that I wanted to share about Thurston. There's not a formal cover crop program. They've you know, never done anything like that or had allocated funding for it yet. But this grant was a really unique way for starting to see how we could incorporate more of that into our assistance and planning and you know, potential cost share in the future. So yeah, that's all I had to share right now. And yeah, I don't know if anyone has any questions. I'd be happy to chat about it at any point. So.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions coming now, but folks, please put those in the chat box if you have any. Okay, not seeing any at this point, Nicole, but if any come in, I'll definitely turn them over to you. So I'll turn it back to you, Allison.
Great. We are gonna hear from Megan Weldon as well at King.
Awesome, thank you. I am a farm planner with Jay Miro at the King Conservation District. So Jay, feel free to chime in at any point if you want to. I was just going to talk mainly about our cost share program. It's been referenced a few times today. So we have an internal cost share program at KCD that has, we fund kind of a subset of NRCS cost share practices, and cover crops is one of those. And so kind of the funding breakdown for what we cost share is 90% of $150 per acre. So that works out to a reimbursement of about $135 an acre. And this is for winter cover crops for 3 consecutive years, with a project maximum of $22,500. So that kind of was designed basically for properties that are 50 acres or less in size. But some of our larger farms have been able to take advantage of that. Last year, the year before, I was able to do a cover crop project with a farm on about probably a little less than 150 acres. So they just kind of maximized their budget up in 1 year. Yeah, and so we fund a range of projects. They range from community farms in the Snoqualmie Valley. We have done a bunch with triticale as a winter cover crop in between corn, grown for corn silage. Most of those projects are in southern King County with dairy farmers. And then recently there's some where we're also trying to help them. It's a little more experimental, but kind of try to help farmers convert some reed canary grass fields back into a productive like pasture or cropland area for vegetable production. So I'm really excited to kind of learn from those and see how those evolve. And this, yeah, our program kind of was designed to help farmers have that space to integrate cover crops into their cropping cycle without having to take that financial risk on their own. So I'd say it's a fairly popular program. We also have an eco drill I think similar to Pierce CD's EcoDrill, it's pretty large, and folks have had good success with that. I had a farmer this year, he planted winter wheat with it and it came in really good. Yeah, and so, oh, one other thing I thought of while we were talking today is that our community agricultural program also did cover crop seed giveaways for a few years for community gardens, and that was a really popular program. People really liked taking advantage of that. So we would give out big bags of seed. I'm trying to remember what the seed mix was. I want to say it was like field pea and Austrian. There was well, we did two different mixes. One was like a rye legume mix, and the rye was a little too much biomass for folks. Then we changed it back to just legumes. But yeah, so we have kind of two different programs. And then some of the challenges that we've had or considering are one policy change we were thinking about is maybe integrating the ability to also use summer cover crops, which I think could be really beneficial, especially for folks struggling with soil compaction. Another challenge we have is that a lot of our farmers are located in the Snoqualmie Valley floodplain, and a lot of their fields are underwater for a good part of the year. And so just trying to help them come up with, you know, cover crop solutions that could work around those challenges. You know, that's been a challenge that I've had. Yeah, and then also kind of to echo what Allie talked about a bit, is trying to find varieties that could be planted late, or, you know, are more robust for kind of if we have a colder fall. I had a few farmers trying to plant in the Snoqualmie Valley, and then we kind of had unexpected like early cold weather and flooding issues. So that was a challenge. And then just some of the other things that we've been talking about recently at KCD are maybe also looking into a smaller drill, because our drill is pretty large and you do need a large tractor to operate it. So maybe just making that a tool for smaller farmers to use would be really interesting. And then just recently we were talking about maybe it would be really great if we could invest in a tool for no-till, like, or soil disturbance for termination, like a crimper or flail mower. I know I saw Pierce CD has a flail mower. So I'd be interested to know if that is popular for folks for terminating their cover crops. So that's kind of the overall gist of what we offer folks. If people want to know more about the details of how our cost share program works, I'm like happy to answer questions or talk to people individually. So feel free to reach out. So I don't know if folks have any questions about that, but I'm really excited to keep learning more from the Western Cover Crop Council. So super excited to see how that works out.
Yeah, just a reminder, if anyone's got questions, please put them in the chat box. Okay, I'm not seeing any at this time, Megan. But if anything pops up, I will definitely interrupt and let you know.
Awesome, sounds good.
Okay. All right, Allison, it's back to you.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much. So the rest of the time, I would love to open it up and maybe we could show video and unmute ourselves and have a session where we can discuss, you know, would people be interested in having a group meet several times through the year? What would the goal be for a group like that? What would people be interested in talking about regularly? So is that possible, Nicole?
I am working on it. Yep, I think I will be unmuting everybody. So just prepare yourselves. If there's a lot of background noise, we'll go back to mute. But at least folks can raise their hand and or put any questions you've got, comments you've got into the questions box, and those can be shared out with the larger group as well. Okay, so folks, you should have the ability to unmute yourself if you want to join in the conversation or add to anything here.
Allie, this is Diane Fish at Kitsap CD. I'm very appreciative of all the resources that you shared, and I can't wait to get the resource list. One thing that would be useful for me, you mentioned Doug Collins is going to have a listserv, and you've mentioned a couple training opportunities that for whatever reason I've missed. So having some really effective resource sharing mechanism would be tremendously valuable for me.
There we go. Yeah, and you haven't missed anything because there hasn't actually been much coming out of the council yet. But I'm expecting that'll kind of come online as Doug gets that organized. But I think you're right that there are a lot of great resources out there, but sometimes they kind of come at us in a kind of haphazard way. And maybe the Cover Crop Council, having that will be a way to kind of streamline information sharing. That's what I'm hoping, at least.
This is Jay from King CD. Does anyone have a stronger number of cost per acre to install cover crop seeds? I know there's a lot of variables, but I was curious if there was, is it on average $200 per acre, or is 150 pretty darn close when you start to include equipment and inoculant and some of the other things here that Pierce CD includes in their seeding? Just curious about what is a good cost per acre for a cost share program?
For our, in our short experience here, just one season of, we've had people add up their costs, and it's often that the costs are higher than 150 an acre, especially if the seed is organic and maybe more some more of the specialty seeds. Once people are, like rye vetch is pretty affordable, but if you're getting into fava beans, or the price really goes up.
Another thing that I've noticed is that perhaps maybe there's like a tiered cost of production or of installation of them, because we have a few small producers and their cost per acre is going to be way higher than a larger producer who might be putting in 100 acres.
Right.
There was a question in the chat box as well. The question was, has anyone had success with, here we go. Where did that go? Has anyone had success with the WSCC Cost Share Cover Cropping Awards with one farmer or multiple farmers?
Great question.
If anyone has, please feel free to put that in there. Some other comments, we can see if anyone's got a comment, feel free to chime in. Another one from Palouse CD said, thanks so much for this. I'd be really interested in talking with folks a couple times a year. So this is in regards to your comment about, can we do a roundtable? He said he has to run to another meeting, but he'll definitely follow up with you, Allison. So definitely some interest in that, which is wonderful. Another comment, you mentioned a free seed program for community gardens. This must be to someone who's spoken so far. Did you observe a benefit to cover crops in those gardens, and was it proportional to the benefits observed on multi-acre farms? Do you think the seed program was worth it?
Megan, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to? That was at a program at King CD.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jay.
That's a good question. I'm not as familiar with that program. Another person manages that, and I know that we've done it several years in a row, like Megan said, including this year. I can't tell you how much cover crop we gave away, but from my conversations with the woman who runs the program, she said she gave away all of her cover crop seed, which is awesome. I don't know how many pounds it was, but we don't do a lot of follow up with the people that are planting the cover crops. So that piece is right. I believe it's just a manpower issue to follow up with each of the community gardens and each of the immigrant farmers that we're promoting these cover crops to. But it's a real interesting question, but I don't have any data on the correlation between, crop field and, large water trough garden or a pea patch garden that some of these giveaway seeds have been offered to. It's very popular though, because people like to get free seeds. So part of it is our advertising to our more urban and potentially suburban land managers that, hey, KCD is here, we're doing these urban programs, and here's some cover crops and some information about them. So it's getting that information to a kind of a different clientele than most CDs work with.
Thanks, Jay. I also want to add in regard to the question earlier about the commission and funding cover crops. There was a comment from Emmett Skagit who said that the commission generally does not fund cover crops because they cannot be checked or reviewed in future years. At least that's the answer he has received. So if anyone else has a different experience with that, please unmute yourself and maybe you can speak up as well. But that sounds like one response to that question.
If that's all the questions that are in the chat, I'd love to just have a check-in with everyone on the call about, if folks would be interested in meeting several times a year, and what those meetings might look like. Sort of the idea that I had in mind was meeting 3 or 4 times a year for an hour, hour and a half, and having a piece where we can just share generally and talk about cover crops, whatever is of interest, any pressing questions, and then have a section of each meeting where we can focus on, hey, let's talk about cost share programs and brainstorm things that work, share about that, or perhaps we have a meeting where it's focused on, well, what are interesting areas of research that we're hearing from our farmers, and kind of discuss that question more, or a time where we could maybe structure some really informal on-farm trials, and if we had a time where we could talk about different things that someone's trying in their region, well, maybe informally we could pick up on that idea and try it with some farmers in the area that I work with. Or so that's sort of the idea. Had something really informal and quick, but something that happened regularly, so that we could just have more opportunity to talk about these sorts of things as CD folks. And then the other idea that I've been bouncing around here on our farm team is, would it make sense to kind of have maybe a story map for CDs, where we could have a story map where we could input different projects that we're doing and you know, share out results. You know, like we were talking about, hey, does WSU have any information on these trials that we've done? Well, sometimes I think trials happen and then the info gets buried, or, you know, it takes a while for that info to get out. But if we had a story map approach where we could just, you know, upload whatever projects we're working with and then have a short recap of what were the results that people could go and check out regularly. That was another idea that I wanted to see if anyone else would be interested in thinking about. And I could also, you know, collect everyone's emails that was on this webinar and send out a bit of a survey too, if that makes sense. If it may be kind of hard to get info from everyone in this format.
Allison, this is Jay. Yeah. I think it's a great idea. And one of the things, I know we're here talking about cover crops, but it might also be interesting to have the same type of discussion about other practices as well. Like, I don't know if I mean, speaking about cover crops 4 times a year seems a lot right now, but who knows? Maybe that sort of thing will actually get more cover crops on the ground. But I could also see, I mean, we're all planners, we all work with crop farmers, but a lot of us work with livestock owners and a whole host of other, you know, maybe some orchards, some Christmas trees out there. So it's almost like we could, yes, talk about cover crops, but maybe have 1 or 2 meetings. It's essentially the same group of people talking about, well, what other crop issues, right? I would love to talk to you about like the type of things you're doing with crop farmers, which King CD, we, like Eric said, we don't have a lot of things to offer crop farmers. Like, let's include some of the other things like relay cropping and, you know, companion plantings. I guess it's the same thing, but, and it could be livestock. Like King CD, we have a ton of experience working with horse farmers. And we sort of do that at Wade. However, ... not everyone goes to Wade. Not everyone goes to that session at Wade. And when will we have Wade again? So I love your idea. I would just put a little caveat or a star to say, hey, let's talk about other BMPs as well. I'd love to hear from Emmett and what the type of work he's doing in Skagit after, you know, we worked together for years here at King. And then other folks that are doing things that are cool and creative.
Yeah, Nicole, when we talked about doing this for cover crops, Nicole was sharing how she had that vision to do that for other areas, right, Nicole?
Yeah, so the CTD is trying to establish, you know, communication-based forums for different planning and technical areas of interest. And so that's something that the CTD can start to assist in creating this platform and forum. And I do see a lot of other comments here that are in favor of this, that, you know, a general opportunity to chat with planners would be tremendously valuable. A survey is also a great idea to capture those ideas. And in addition to that, like Wade is great once a year, but like Jay mentioned, it's hard to get there. So let's create a new opportunity that takes advantage of all of us being on these virtual platforms and now like acclimating to this and tooling up. And so this is a great way to work together and to share this information. And others also mentioned the idea of a story map as a way to share information on cover cropping. Success and lessons is also successful. So Allison, it looks like everything you've mentioned people support. So now it's, you know, looking for your bandwidth and finding what really works for folks, reaching out. But yes, these forums, you guys can keep connecting. The CTD will be the central hub to keep this going with Allison and get you all connected into it.
And maybe what I should do is send up a follow-up email, maybe a bit of a survey, and just get a feel for what would be the top priorities and how often to meet, or
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Does anyone have experience with story maps?
Perhaps that is a training opportunity for us.
Yeah. We have someone on staff here who's really good with them, and I'm sure would be happy to help set one up. And I'm just starting to wrap my head around story maps, but it seems like something that is easily something that people from, you can set it up and then people from all over can plug into it pretty easily. Oh, and I also wanted to mention Grassland Oregon, that seed company who had that cover crop forum a few years ago. They just started or created a map that's nationwide. It's sort of the same idea where people can pin their projects, and you can go and just click on a map and open up a small summary of the cover crop research that's going on there. So that's in the chat as well, a link to that. But that would be kind of the idea, is just a place you could go and kind of visually see where cover crop work is going on and click it and get a short summary with some contacts for who to reach out to if you wanted more information. Does anyone else have any comments on networking or other ideas outside of a regular meetup group, story map? And like I said, I think it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the Cover Crop Council and whether this sort of effort might get folded into that eventually. But I do feel like CDs are unique enough in the work that we're doing with landowners that it would still be neat to connect amongst ourselves in our own effort.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for putting all this together and creating this forum for all of us. I think this is really valuable.
Nice. Yeah, I just, I feel like I pick up so many great nuggets and conversations with people. So it's nice to have a really informal, regular time set up where we could do that.
Okay, anything else you want to add in, Allison? It looks like a survey is going to come out here. A lot of people are really interested in supporting this communication extension via forum, etc. So I'm really glad you were able to bring that together today.
Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in, and I'll follow up. And if anyone else has any ideas or thoughts, follow up with me. It'd be great.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Allison, for speaking today and bringing our other panelists on, Eric, Megan, and Nicole. All of you guys did a great job. We really appreciate you all sharing your great knowledge and information with the group today. So, and thank you to all of our attendees today for tuning in and sharing your experiences and ideas. I can see this engagement blooming into many other things. So it's great to see that. And I just want to kind of wrap things up today by folks, if you have a webinar or project, anything else you would love to share or seen shared on this CTD platform, just put anything into the questions box. We'll capture that and follow up on those ideas. Otherwise, we hope everyone stays safe and happy and healthy this year and this holiday season. And thanks for joining us and good luck to everybody.